Footballtribe YouTube channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. It's a pleasure to be back. It's 32 minutes past the hour of 9 a.m. We are 30 minutes late, largely because of power that disrupted our morning routine and schedules. But it's back. I do not know for how long. I can't have any guarantees. It could go in as soon as the first minute of this broadcast. But let me hope that won't be the case. But I hope it's a good morning for all of you. It's always a pleasure to be back here on the channel with every single one of you. For those of you that managed to catch our broadcast last night, thank you so much. We were on there as we did have a chat, a bit of a fruitful chat with Safa Ali from Turkey. There, the fan of Fenerbahce, giving us insights in regards to what the expectations are as far as the Turkish Super League is concerned. We did talk about the sacking of managers. We spoke about, certain things in that broadcast that I thought you shouldn't miss out on. And if you indeed you did miss out on them, please do not hesitate to head over to the channel, go under the live broadcasts and look out for last night's broadcast. Meanwhile, we also did put out, a new video on the channel speaking about the new Uganda Premier League format. Then we did also speak about, Uganda Cranes' chances of qualifying for the FIFA World Cup 2026 that will be hosted in the United States of America, as well as, Canada and Mexico. We spoke a bit about that, and those chances are very, very minimal, if we are to be honest to ourselves, because Algeria do lead the pile in Group G, where Uganda do find themselves in second place. We were speaking to Aldrin Suruga, a seasoned, sports writer, broadcaster, KCCA enthusiast, and as well as the Liverpool fan, the Uganda Cranes, and the Uganda Cranes are in action tonight or today, later this evening at 7 p.m. East African time when they take on Somalia. So we'll be discussing about that in a bit. And then we'll be chatting about Arsenal, where I think Mikel Arteta and Andre Berta have been exonerated in their transfer choices that they made during the course of the transfer window. Otherwise, allow me have our audio tested before we drag this on any further to make sure everything does check out perfectly well. So those are some of the things that we'll be talking about this morning to own your favorite football app. Looks like the audio is good, unless any one of you on that end has a different experience. Allow us to proceed in that breadth. So those will formulate the gist of our conversation this morning. Allow me have our header updated so that you are well versed with what the topics are going to be as of this morning. So it's always good to I think Andre Berta and Mikel Arteta in the long run will be more validated than in the short run. But yeah, let's kick things off with the with the FIFA World Cup qualifiers. Spain put 6 past Turkey. I mean, that's a humiliating result really for Turkey. Mikel Merino scoring the hat-trick in that one. There was a burst of assists for Lamine Yamal, a burst of assists for Mikel Oyarzabal. There was, I think, an assist and a burst of goals from Pedri. So Nico Williams providing the assist there for one of those goals. And then, of course, that action will continue during the course of this week until we bring the international break to a close. I think with some of the last games possibly set to be played on Wednesday, but majority of them are going to be played between today and tomorrow. Yes, those are the expectations. So let's kick things off with the Uganda Cranes, because Uganda Cranes are going to return to action today against Somalia, a team that they managed to beat in the first encounter. I think it was by 1-0. However, the sticking point with this Uganda Crane side has always been that we've had so many changes in the Uganda Cranes starting 11 that you never know what to expect. not usually in the terms of results, but in the terms of a consistent lineup. Every time we go away and return for another international break, you expect different things. You expect a different setup of a team. You expect many players to be dropped, others to be brought in. Speaking of this particular edition, we know that Jordan Obita is a new player to our eyes as Uganda Cranes fans, but he did have a very, very beautiful partnership with Elio Capradosi in the centre back. The centre back pairing, while Aziz Kayondo was on the other side, and Elvis Bomono on the other. That's at right back. Aziz Kayondo playing at left back. Then Salim Jamal Magola, we know he's been absent for the international team scene for a good chunk of time because of his sort of I don't want to call it a disrepute, but what the Federation of Uganda Football Associations would consider a disrepute between them and the player. Well, I mean, you know, we live in the world where people do not want to be told the truth. We live in the world where people, when they think they are older than you, they think you cannot advise them or you cannot critique them. And for me, practically, I think that's where the cause of trouble or their source of trouble came from. From what we gather, it had everything to do with players' welfare and players trying to demand for what's right with them. And then people decided to take things personal. If there's anything I've had on numerous occasions that our football officials hate at the Federation of Uganda Football Associations, is players demanding what they are owed, is players demanding for what is due to them. And people take that as a as a show of disrespect. People take that as if, you know, they are trying to paint them in a bad image, and yet that's not the case. That's not the case. Be straightforward with people. Do what's right. You know, wanting to do things behind closed doors, take corners and shortcuts. That's what always leads to that. But anyway, that all aside, we do have Salim Jamal Magola back into the setup, as well as Dennis Masinde Onyango, who we know had left the team or had retired, I think, post the Africa Cup of Nations 2019, around that period. I think after, you know, subsequently, a couple of, you know, tournaments later, he did hung his boots on the national team, and he's returned to the fold. I think predominantly more as a leader, more as a player coach kind of, to help with the goalkeepers in the goalkeeping department, because Joel Mutakubwa is still also in that setup. And then Salim Jamal, with all his experience, I mean, he is the de facto #1 goalkeeper. And I get the feeling, if let's say we go for Africa Cup of Nations 2025, that will be in Morocco, and if Uganda Cranes can make it out of the group stages, then possibly that's when maybe if you reach the knockout stages and you find yourself in a stalemate in no more time and you need to go for penalties, maybe that's when you call on the experience of Dennis Masinde Onyango, or maybe that's when you bring him, you know, between the sticks because he's that giant of a goalkeeper. He's big, he's tall. I mean, we've seen him on numerous occasions of penalties, not just on the Uganda Cranes national team, but predominantly with his club at Mamelodi Sundowns over there in South Africa. So that's the kind of player that he is in regards to in regards to his role, first of all, in this national team setup, because some people did question his return to the team, thinking or trying to paint a picture that it was going to deny perhaps you know, those upcoming maybe an opportunity and things like that. But I do not want to look at it that way. We've seen every team needs those kind of senior players. Not everybody that is a senior player or comes of age is just moved on just like that. We know for a fact that players have some players are no longer being summoned to the national team, and they've never retired. While yes, they've lacked the form, it shouldn't always be about the form, because you need that. You need those natural leaders within that cohort of players, especially when you know you're dealing with a team that is a bit young. Because when you're looking at players like Rogers Mato, when you look at players like Alan Okello, when you players like Joseph Mbande, Aziz Kayondo, Kenneth Kenneth Semakula, when you look at Jude Mugabe's, those kinds of players, really. When you look at that composition of players, they need that seniority figure within them to sort of try to guide them forward, to calm the pressure when it is necessary, to give them the pep talk when they need one, to give them a dressing down when they need one. Because sometimes, especially in our African context, when you're dealing with a foreign manager, we know that some of our players do struggle with the English language. And if a manager is giving them a dressing down in English, sometimes the message may not, go on quite directly, as opposed to them just reading off a face of frustration and a ranting from a manager or the head coach of the national team in that regard. So you do need a player of his stature in Dennis Masinde Onyango. So when you look at the groups, for example, for the Africa Cup of Nations 2025 that will be hosted in Morocco, Uganda do find themselves in Group C, a very, very difficult group, by the way, because it has Tunisia, that's the 2004 champions. You have Tanzania, they've never won it, as well as Uganda themselves have never won it. You have Nigeria. They are one of the most, decorated, African teams in as far as those groups are concerned. So that will be the edition that they are competing for. So back to this current setup of team, I do not expect one too many changes in that setup or that beat up against Mozambique, because in any case, Mozambique is in itself a tougher opponent than you could make comparison of Somalia. And however, I do not want or expect this Uganda Crane side to have complacency taking on Somalia, because it is easy for the result against Mozambique to get onto your head to say we managed to blow away Mozambique, especially in that second half, who are Somalia. We all know that underdogs can cause an upset to the big boys on any given day. So, excuse me. My expectation and hope is that the Uganda Cranes do not, treat this game with complacency. Do I expect changes in this starting 11? If I were Paul put, maybe I would make some changes, or where I would make some changes would maybe with Elvis Bomono, maybe Kenneth Semakula. I thought he did not have the best of games. Jude Semugabi, Stephen Mukwara, those kinds of players really. You thought they didn't have the best of days in office, but given that it is Somalia, maybe it would be understandable if they give them another go at it. Maybe Travis Muchaba to come in that place of Jude Semugabi, maybe. I'm just thinking out loud on this one. Maybe Habat Achai comes in, But anyways, we will see. Abdul Karim Watambara to come in midfield. But we had the setup of Kenneth Semakula alongside Khalid Aucho in that deep lying wall. And then you had Jude Semugabi ahead of the two, as well as Aaron Okello in that number 10 kind of role. And then Rogers Matovu, Kasim Rogers Mato or Matovu. And then, Stephen Mukwara leading the lines. I think we still lack that, a striker, that target man that is in the realm of David Obua, that is in the realm of, Massa. We still need that person. We need still that person. If there's a lack of transition in that role, I feel there is a lack of transition in that role. That we need to find a more potent talisman. But we'll wait and see how Paul Put does assemble his team. Anyways, away from the Uganda Cranes, my expectation, by the way, is that for Uganda Cranes to win that game by 3-0. That's my expectation. That's my prediction. That's my hope. To try and apply more pressure on the table leaders when it comes to Group G of these qualifiers, and that's none other than Algeria, because Algeria have a trip away to Guinea. Guinea is a very, very difficult opponent. There's so many games that's going to be played today, but when you look at Group G, particularly, you do have Algeria leading the pile with 18 points. So if Uganda can beat up against Somalia and hope that Guinea beat up against Algeria, it means that Uganda will solidify their stay in that second place pool with just 3 points behind Algeria. So you try and pile a bit of more pressure. But also, you give yourself another better chance to qualify through the playoffs, which are very, very difficult by their own nature and things like that. So let's wait and see how everything will be the outlook on that. But like I said, so many games are to be played today at 6 p.m. You do expect Equatorial Guinea up against Tunisia, Zambia up against Morocco, Mozambique against Botswana, that's in Group G. Chad would be up against Madagascar, Guinea against Algeria, all those games kicking off at 7 p.m. Malawi versus Liberia, Guinea-Bissau against Djibouti, Uganda, Somalia, Libya, Eswatini, and as well as Ghana up against Mali. That's in as far as the 10 p.m. kickoff games are concerned. And then quickly, guys, let's run away from that because our time is fast spent. Like I said, we did come on here a bit late because of power issues. But I hope we can, get this one out of the way. And then quickly, so Arsenal, I feel that Andre Berta has been exonerated and Mikel Arteta so far are very early on into the season in regards to their choices of transfers. Now, a lot of people, Arsenal fans in particular, and some pundits and football commentators did question Arsenal's pursuit for Christian Mosquera, a 21-year-old Spanish centre-back from Valencia at the time, because going into the transfer window, we all knew that Arsenal's problems were none other than, were not defensive, that they didn't need the defenders, at least as priority, that their priorities lay within the central midfield, creative or attacking midfield, as well as that forward line, the striking line, given that we came into the transfer window with the absence of Gabriel Jesus. We knew that Kai Havertz was recovering from that hamstring injury. And guess what? One game into the season, having come on as a substitute against Manchester United, he suffered a knee injury and he's had to have to undergo a bit of a minor surgery, as some people have described it, and we do not know for how long he's going to be out for. But the expectation was that the priorities would be within those votes. And then yet, Mikel Arteta and Andre Berta, when they went into the transfer window, after securing the services of the likes of Kepa Arrizabalaga from Chelsea, because that was a priority position for a backup goalkeeper for David Raya, and then securing Martin Zubimendi, and then subsequently Christian Nogan. Again, a decision, one that many Arsenal fans did question. But particularly, I want us to focus on the signing of Hi LFC, good to have you back. How are you doing, my brother? How was your rugby game over the weekend? Was everything fine? Did you win? What happened? So you do look at that and think to yourself, particularly, like I said, the signing of Christian Mosquera. I mean, we're 5 minutes into that game against Liverpool. New haircut. Yeah, new haircut. I always go for a trim, after every 2 weeks, because I hate having to scratch my head combing my hair, so I prefer it to be short with just brush through it. You won the cup. Congratulations to you and your team, your fellow teammates, and your entire squad in that regard. Congratulations upon winning that cup. I do not think I've ever appreciated the game of rugby enough, because I've always thought it's a bit rough. I look at the tackles, how people go in them, having to sort of dive to catch somebody's legs. I've always looked at it as the sort of sporting equivalent of wrestling, in that regard. But I do appreciate the fans that have a passion for it. I mean, I know a couple of rugby fans, and when you go over to our local stadium here in Chadondo, when you watch those rugby fans enjoying it, you can really, really see how they connect to the game. But congratulations to you and your team, LFC. Anyways, back to the Arsenal conversation briefly. So we saw 5 minutes into that, 1-0 loss at Anfield, that William Saliba suffered an ankle injury, and according to Quip, is expected to be out for a period of about 3 to 4 weeks. Now, imagine Arsenal hadn't signed Christian Mosquera, I think they would sort of be quote unquote in a bit of a panic mode because William Saliba's injury came at a time when they were without Benjamin White. So that means that's another void within their backline. Of course, they would have managed to shift some bodies and maybe put Urian Timber to play alongside Gabriel Magalhaes, maybe, and then send maybe Ricardo Carafiori to play at at right back, and then have Maz Lewis Kelly start on the other side. Or I do not know, because again, because you could not have put in Christian Nogard to play as a makeshift right back because he's equally out injured. So you can see that them going out in the transfer window to pursue the signing of Christian Mosquera has exonerated them very, very early in the season. And in any case, his performance against Liverpool was one not to be questioned. And the reason as to why many people questioned it is because Arsenal's pursuit of a defender in the transfer window did not start with Christian Mosquera. And earlier reports were linking them with the move for Dinhausen, for whom we knew that Chelsea, Liverpool, and Real Madrid were all interested in his signature, as well as Newcastle. But we know that it's Real Madrid that won the race. At some point, they were being linked with the move for McKay, and that did not materialize. We know how that story ended. Liverpool almost nearly signed him. Almost everything was done and dusted until the very last minute that he could return to Crystal Palace. Then we know they had interest in Joel Hartle. We know how that ended. They never managed to secure that. But the point here is that I think Andre Berta and Mikel Arteta have been vindicated very early into the season because we go into the weekend when after the international break when Arsenal will be taking on Nottingham Forest. I do not think there will be I do not think they will be really concerned about the absence of William Saliba now. Whereas the two and not to be compared in terms of potential or defensive solidity, that's Christian Mosquera and William Saliba. Take nothing away from Mosquera because he did not put a foot wrong in that game against Liverpool. Of course, that was the first very big test for him. He had a test for blood in that game against Leeds United, but one would argue that Arsenal having put 4-5 past Leeds United, it was lesser an opponent, So, but Liverpool is always a tough, especially when you're playing away in that noisy Anfield side, and things like that. So, thought he had a very good performance. So, going into the weekend, for as long as Gabriel Magalhaes returns from the Brazilian national team fully fit, and Ricardo Carafiori returns from the Italian national team fully fit, Maz Lewis Kelly returning from the England national team, as well as Urian Timber returning from the Dutch national team. As long as those return fully fit, I think their backline will be okay. But this just speaks to the foresight of Mikel Arteta and Andre Berta to sign Christian Mosquera as the right-sided centre back who can also play at right back. Then also the other player that I wanted us to sort of look at in terms of this exoneration of Andre Berta and Mikel Arteta is Noni Madueke. Now, you see, Arsenal fans are the group of fans who ask for one thing and for some reason they suffer temporary amnesia, forget what they ask for, and then criticize when they are given exactly what they ask for. Imagine yourself walking into a restaurant and you ask for fish fingers and French fries, and then suddenly you go scrolling into your phone, somebody gives you a bit of a distressing call that puts you a bit off your game, and then suddenly the waiter delivers what you asked for, and then you're like, I did not ask for fish fingers, I asked for chicken breast. Basically that's how I'll describe Arsenal fans in that moment. Now we know for about 2 full-blown seasons, Arsenal fans were clamoring for a backup player for Bukayo Saka, because Bukayo Saka we know he gets kicked a lot in the game and things like that, gets picked up on opponents clipping him and things like that, but he was playing too many minutes, too many games, week in, week out, and he needed a rest. He needed that bit of rotation to give him a breather, and Arsenal did not have very many options to back that up of options that were potent enough to give him that breather he really much needed. Now, Arsenal go out and spend £48 million as a guaranteed fees, plus a 4 unexpected add-ons on a 23-year Chelsea starter in Noni Madueke. And Arsenal fans were all over it. They were wondering, why are we spending now? They were wondering, why are we spending 50 million quid on a player that we do not need, on a player that is not good enough, that's too much money, and things like that. No. Now, the time when they made those arguments, I must acknowledge, was a time before they completed the signing of, Victor Gyökeres. So we knew that saga was sort of still dragging on. But Arsenal were confident that at some point it would get over the line. That, or if it weren't him, they knew that at the end of the day they were going to bring in a striker. So, but eventually it ended. Now, guess what? 2 games into the season, and in that game against Leeds, particularly, I think Bukayo Saka posed his hamstring. Posed his hamstring. Guess what? Who started against Liverpool? It was Noni Madueke in that right wing role, and if the first half was anything to go by, he was Arsenal's best player on the pitch going forward. We know he caused Liverpool lots of troubles, although Milos Kakes did really, really well, immaculately well in defending against Noni Madueke. But, he had his moments, including the only shot that I think Arsenal had on target in the opening half, so came through Noni Madueke. So, now that he is there and they can go to bed thinking about tomorrow's game, well confident that in the absence of Bukayo Saka, we have Noni Madueke, who is capable of creating impact down that right flank, but also we have a backup in Max Dorman. And if push comes to shove, we can also throw in there. What's his name? Ethan Nwaneri to play in the same role, or even send Leandro Trossard. Now, again, Gabriel Jesus, who can also play there, is absent. We know that at one point, Leandro Trossard had to limp off a game through what was feared to be a minor injury. So, again, Andre Berta, Mikel Arteta, and their choices, in as far as the transfer window are concerned, have been exonerated very, very early on into the season, because it's early on into the season, and Arsenal have had as many as 6, 7 injuries already. Gabriel Jesus still out recovering from that anterior cruciate ligament injury. Kai Havertz after 1 game. Bukayo Saka on match day 2. Ben White out injured. You've had Martin Odegaard suffer that injury to his shoulder. You've had who else? Bukayo Saka. So sorry. So we mentioned Jesus, Kai Havertz, Bukayo Saka, Martin Odegaard, William Saliba, all these are players that have gone out through injury, and because Arsenal had the foresight to make those necessary, buys in the transfer window to further and strengthen their squad depth, in a way they've been exonerated. They're not having to suffer much. Ben White, yes, Ben White is the other player that I was trying to look for. They are all out through injury, and because Arsenal managed, because again in the absence, if let's say they were to unfortunately lose a Julian Timber to injury before Ben White returns, then you have Christian Mosquera to play at right back, and then you call Ricardo Carafiori to play alongside Gabriel Magalhaes, and you play Mazrou Skeri at left back. They've signed Piero Hincapi from Bayer Leverkusen, again left-footed centre back as a backup for Gabriel Magalhaes, but can also play at left back. Now, a lot of people are questioning. We already have Gabriel Magalhaes. Ricardo Carafiori can play in a similar role. Of course, we know they let go of Jacob Kivior, but let's not forget, it's about 60 games in a season. These players tired. These players need that bit of rotation, and Arsenal have lacked that for a very, very long time. So I'd want to believe that Mikel Arteta and Andre Berta have been exonerated when it comes to those decisions. And it's only the tip of the iceberg, I feel, because the season is still young, and yet we are already validating and applauding them for making those foresight decisions. So much to the criticism of some of their own fans, particularly on those deals on that deal for Noni Madueke. I just did not see it coming. They aren't having it. I know even the most senior of Arsenal journalists questioned the signing itself. Charles Schwartz, for those of you that do follow him, formerly at Goal and Football.London, I think he does a column for Court Offside on Arsenal. He was questioning that. And James Bench, his counterpart, who he normally hosts, I think once or twice in a week, was really confident about the signing. He saw all the right reasons for why Arsenal were doing it, and that Noni Madueke is a player on the verge of explosion. Whether he does indeed explode, that remains to be seen. But what we cannot question, or what we cannot doubt, or what we cannot wash away, is a very potent backup player for Bukayo Saka. Anyways, lastly, let's wrap this broadcast with the news regarding Andre Onana, because he's agreed to join Trabzonspor in Turkey. The Athletic put out quite a good piece about Andre Onana in regards to his time at Manchester United and things like that. But the interesting bit is that is while this is what they said in their own post on X. They said Andre Onana was supposed to help Manchester United transform the way Manchester United played. A goalkeeper who excelled with the ball at his feet and who would enable them move on after David De Gea's departure. 2 years after joining, he has agreed to move on loan to Trabzonspor. His reputation dented by a turbulent time at Old Trafford, while there is no hiding his struggles. The truth is his exit says as much about Manchester United as it does about him. Again, for me, I've already said about this, and you cannot tell me that Manchester United, season in, season out, go out in the transfer window, identify some of the best players, if not the very best, because after 2023, after the season of 2022-2023, in which Manchester City won the treble, Andre Onana was the best goalkeeper in the world in that Inter Milan losing side when they lost Manchester City by 1-0. That goal scored by Rodrigo Cascante in the finals of the UEFA Champions League. Suddenly, he joins Manchester United 2 seasons in, and you're telling me he's the worst goalkeeper you've ever seen? I do not buy that. The question is always, yes, he's without his flaws, but who is he playing with? Is that defense good enough to protect him? Is that midfield good enough to protect the defense? Or are they oftentimes exposed? Again, I made reference to the fact that David De Gea Quintana, for many, many years, before the arrival of Bruno Fernandes, and even at some point, after the arrival of Bruno Fernandes, was always Manchester United's best player. Why? Because if the goalkeeper is making one too many saves, that means he is easily approached or accessed, that he is being forced to make those saves. You could say it is his role to make those saves. But we know the defense is there to protect the goalkeeper. So if they're not protecting him well enough, we cannot constantly fault him for every little thing that goes wrong within Manchester United. And I loved a submission by somebody called the Swedish Rambo. This is what they had to say about Andre Onana, and this is what we'll wrap up with, because I think he summarizes it in the very best possible way that I myself have always put it, or almost close to similar words. He says, make no mistake, this is true 100%, because he was responding to the comments or the post by the Athletic. He said, make no mistake, this is 100% true. The failed Andre Onana move says a lot about Manchester United than Onana. He signed a goalkeeper but did nothing about absolutely disastrous depth in the backline. Forcing Eric Ten Hag to play with Maguire and John Evans at centre back and Lindelof at left back for almost a full season is like forcing Amorim to play with Christian Eriksen types in the number 10 wards. I have nothing against Eriksen or Maguire and co, but Amorim wants legs and movement at number 10, and Eriksen do not quote that. And Erik Ten Hag wanted his centre backs to be the playmakers of the team and to have the ability to get open and take passes when pressured in terms of fitting the requirements, it's bad. It gets to this, So you can see, people understand that yes, you can fault Onana for some mistakes, but not everything rested upon his shoulders in that Manchester United jersey. Allow me to call it a wrap. Thank you so much, LFC, for sparing the moment to be with us. And every single one of you that manages to catch this podcast every single day, Monday to Saturday, 9 a.m. And every single night at 11 p.m. We do not take your love and support for granted. Catch you guys next time. Have a blessed day. For those of you going to watch the Uganda Cranes Somalia game, I wish you the best of luck. Let me leave you and go to your respective duties as I also go for my subsequent engagements. Bye-bye for now.